Hello, good evening and welcome. Swiss authorities have announced that they may investigate the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's aid distribution plans amid concerns over neutrality as the conflict continues to escalate in Gaza. This comes as the Syrian president meets US envoy in Istanbul to discuss lifting sanctions, enhancing bilateral ties, and Turkey's support for Syria's energy needs. Welcome to our special coverage here on Q News. The World Food Programme has warned that Palestinian families in Gaza are on the brink of starvation, highlighting the urgent need for continuous, daily and unhindered humanitarian aid into the blockaded region. In a post on X, the UN agency described the crisis as catastrophic, especially since Israel closed all crossings on March 2nd. The World Food Programme called for a steady daily flow of aid trucks and stressed the importance of safely and promptly distributing aid within Gaza to prevent further suffering. Swiss authorities are considering an investigation into the US and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, which plans to begin overseeing aid distribution in Gaza later this month. The move follows a request from NGO Trial International to examine whether the Swiss-registered GHF, which intends to use private security contractors, complies with Swiss and international law. The UN and several aid groups have criticized the initiative as lacking neutrality and potentially endangering civilians. GHF insists it adheres to humanitarian principles and opposes forced displacement. Euromed Human Rights Monitor has verified that 1,010 Palestinian families in Gaza have been completely wiped out by Israel military action. According to its chairman, Rami Abdul, in a post on X, 2,620 families have only one surviving member, while 4,126 families have no more than two members left alive. The Geneva-based group continues to document the human toll of the ongoing conflict. Now for more on this, we are joined by Ashraf Al-Ashri, who is the Al-Ahram newspaper managing editor, joining us from Cairo. Thanks very much for being here with us on the program. So what specific concerns have been raised about the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and its neutrality and compliance with international law?
First, the situation in the Gaza Strip is going from bad to worse. The genocide and the killing are ongoing, and the starvation has reached its peak during the past week, and everything related to entering humanitarian aid is doomed to fail. The GHF is a US proposal with US sponsorship, and that will not meet the purpose because it will be under the control of the occupying Israeli forces. Four areas will be established in the center and the south of the Gaza Strip. And what will the population of the north do? Will they go daily to the center or the south to get one meal, and they will not be able to go back to the north again? There are also a lot of Israeli hindrances to not activate the mechanism of this foundation, because it will be under the control of certain people. Also, special records will be specified for who will obtain the meals, so that Hamas members do not obtain such meals, which will lead to the continuity of the starvation. In addition, the United Nations and its humanitarian agencies um, suspected that this foundation would actually succeed to provide food, as a U.S. Foundation under the sponsorship of
Okay,
Israel.
well, I just want to bring us on to another point here. How much? I mean, we're talking now about private security contractors being brought in for aid distribution. What would that mean for the safety of civilians in Gaza?
Of course, these contractors will be subject to control of Israel. Israel will be the supervisor of selecting these contractors, and they will designate only four areas around the Netzarim corridor and in Palestinian Rafah and the Mirage um, corridor. And this will deprive half of the Palestinian population of the humanitarian aid and food, and it only gives each person one supply share for 15 days, and that will not be sufficient for the entire family. Also, selected persons will be chosen to get these supplies. So this foundation is doomed to fail. In addition, the Israeli intervention will intervene to um, control the amount of aid entered into Gaza, which will lead to the delay of submissions and will deprive the majority of getting their shares, and most of the north population will not be able to go back, which completely violates the international humanitarian law and will lead to the continuity of the starvation in Gaza. The purpose of these practices is to force the Palestinian people to relocate and to exit Gaza so-called voluntarily, which is the desire of Netanyahu and the far-right government. And some special sanctions were proposed to be imposed on Israel recently.
And of course, that displacement idea strongly opposed by most right-thinking people. When it comes to Israel, of course, we're seeing more and more public protests day by day. Is there any chance that these public protests might shape government policy in Israel?
Absolutely. These protests regarding the release of detainees and the dead bodies remaining. There are 58 detainees alive and dead are still in Gaza. These daily protests in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and in front of Netanyahu's house are pressuring for bringing back the detainees. But Netanyahu is completely indifferent towards these protests. To pressure Hamas and eliminate it and disarm it, and the second move will be to force the Palestinian population to leave Gaza, which is completely rejected by Egypt and the entire Arab world. But in exchange, Netanyahu sees himself very secure right now, He has 68 seats in the Knesset, which gives him more power to insist on his stances, and he rejects to relinquish any of his policies, and even the delegation sent to Doha for the negotiations was drawn without any reasons or justifications, and he did not even accept a 55-day truce. And he's waiting for a U.S. move. The U.S. Stance is completely useless, and these said divisions between Netanyahu and Trump are not leading to any real pressures on Israel. Now they are stopping. There are threats of pressures from Europe on Israel to impose sanctions or threat the economic relations during the next few days.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Ashraf El Ashri, who is the managing editor of Al Ahram newspaper. Thank you very much for joining us here on the program. Now let's get the latest on Syria. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara met with U.S. envoy Tom Barak in Istanbul to discuss lifting American sanctions on Syria. The presidency said the sanctions continue to hinder economic recovery and burden civilians. Al-Shara reaffirmed Syria's opposition to any attempts to divide the country and stressed the government's commitment to national unity. The AFP reports that Syria has agreed to help the U.S. locate missing American nationals in Damascus. U.S. envoy Tom Barak said the move is a major step forward in bilateral ties. He added that President Donald Trump considers the return of or recovery of American citizens as a top priority. Turkey has announced it will supply Syria with 2 billion cubic meters of natural gas annually. The announcement was made by Turkish Energy Minister and during a joint press conference in Damascus alongside his Syrian counterpart. He said the gas deliveries are expected to support the generation of an additional 1,300 megawatts of electricity inside Syria. He also confirmed that Turkey will provide an extra 1,000 megawatts of electricity to meet Syria's short-term energy needs. Syrian Energy Minister Mohammed al-Bashir said both sides agreed to activate a key gas pipeline linking the two countries, with gas flows set to begin in June. Now, for more on this, we are joined by Mohammed Ez El-Din, who is Al Ahram managing editor, joining us from Cairo. Thank you very much for being here on the program. So, how does Syria's commitment to national unity influence its negotiations with the United States and Turkey?
Thank you so much, for having me on Q News. Of course, it's a difficult equation to maintain the Syrian territorial integrity and unity, and in addition to committing to what has been agreed upon with the U.S. administration and the face-to-face meeting with the U.S. President, with the attendance of the Saudi Crown Prince. It's a very complicated problem. It has been for tens of years. In addition to the Israeli existence on the Syrian lands, in addition to the military bases inside Syria, and the huge ethnic and racial and religious diversity in Syria, which makes maintaining the unity of Syrian lands and meeting some new conditions, including relations with the Israeli side, highly difficult and challenging for the new Syrian administration. I think that lifting the sanction from Syria on Syria is highly significant, but there are several numerous challenges regarding the democratic participation and engagement of all Syrian factions, whether on the political or social levels, regarding the reconstruction phase and starting a new phase, especially that there are numerous backgrounds for the conflict in Syria. Now they are trying to find consensus and common grounds, and there is a desire from the international community to grant Syria a trial period to test well intentions and how would they address the challenges in a different manner compared to former eras that were filled with the tensions with the neighboring countries in addition to the sanctions imposed on Syria.
And do you think that Turkey's support for Syria and their closeness on this issue, on the lifting of sanctions, is something that might reshape regional dynamics?
Definitely, the Levant now, after what happened in Syria and also what happened in Lebanon, there are so many variables. The old Levant disappeared, and there is a new phase in Syria, and there are approaches as Shara visited Turkey 3 times since the fall of Bashar al-Assad regime, which means that there are very close visions and views. And Syria wants Turkey present somehow to create balance with the Israeli presence. And consequently, there is a new phase of cooperation with Turkey, whether in the military field by maintaining the Turkish military bases and developing them in the future under the pretense of counter-terrorism, or in the field of reconstruction, which is Turkey paying a lot of attention to. They are helping in the field of energy, and there is an agreement being prepared, and it's not announced yet, in the field of maritime demarcation of borders. We have seen the energy crisis in the region and the Turkish desire to have control over the energy streams in the region. So there is a lot of economic cooperation and military cooperation in addition to the political support granted to President Chara from President Erdogan and the Turkish state in general. There is balance between Israel and Turkey in Syria now, and there are hopes from the states of the region to build a better future for Syria.
Now, President Trump has said that he is prioritizing the return and recovery of American citizens from Damascus. Is this a step forward in foreign policy terms?
Of course, definitely the new Syrian regime is working to strengthen relation with the U.S. administration, as the U.S. media is indicating such efforts at the moment, and even bringing back the remains I think that Syria is willing to cooperate with everyone in this particular phase and meeting the US desires, whether with direct relations and strengthening them, or regarding some concessions that might some see as new and surprising, but we can call it an olive branch to cooperate with partners in the region, most prominent of which Israel. So cooperating with the United States is highly significant for the Syrian regime at the moment, especially that lifting the sanctions started with relieving some restraints. And the U.S. convoy, the U.S. envoy negotiations, Barak, and these negotiations are still ongoing. So providing information or helping to who find the missing U.S. Citizens is a very important step and will strengthen the relations between Syria and the US, and it will create some kind of confidence to complete the US requests to maintain the ethnic and religious diversity in Syria and protecting the minorities, especially in the light of the arms distributed across Syria. These challenges must be tackled in a diplomatic way and not by power as it used to happen.
Well, of course, one of the big issues to come out of this news is the activation of the gas pipeline between Turkey and Syria. How big a deal is this?
Definitely, there will be a lot of Turkish support for supplying Syria with energy, especially electricity. The Syrian infrastructure are bearing new projects and can be significantly supported in cooperation with Turkey and the international partners. The Turkish objective here is to sign strategic cooperation agreements in the field of energy and the maritime borders demarcation, like the agreements signed between Turkey and Libya with the Dubaiba government, and consequently the Turkish side is seeking to secure energy for Syria, hoping to secure the gas pipes in the regional waters between the two countries.
Do you think, by any chance, that this new engagement, this diplomatic engagement between Syria and the United States, might set a precedent for other countries who have had difficulties in the region?
It's strange because Syria at the first place was one of the states very keen on resisting Israel, and currently there is Syrian readiness to cooperate or to coexist with the US demands to establish relations with Israel. It's very clear, either for the Syrians or for the neighboring countries or other states that had strategic relations with Syria, there is keenness and endeavors to solve the crisis by lifting the sanctions, in addition to establish the position of the new Syrian Republic as a democratic presidency that does not distinguish between powers, and it fights terrorism, in addition to accepting the US pressures to establish relations with Israel. And consequently, these things are still not clear in the application wise how will the relations be established, but we are starting to see indicators of the new Syrian Republic and the interim president ready to cooperate somehow with the Israeli side, and he's also
Well,
keen on keeping powers balanced.
indeed. And thank you very much, Mohammed Ez Al-Din. Thank you very much for joining us. Mohammed Ez Al-Din is the Al Ahram managing editor. Thank you for being on the program. Very interesting insights. Now, that brings us to the end of this special coverage on the latest developments in the region. Now, don't forget, you can join us on our social media platforms: YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews ETY. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News. Have a good night.